Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to another webinar by UAE chapter. Before we start, it's 7 p.m. We'll start the webinar at 7:05 once we have all of the attendees joining us who has registered them for the webinar. I hope you have joined with your PMI UAE webinar, that PMI registered email ID so that you can get the PDUs. And we have till now, we have 39 people who have registered, who have joined us. And you can please put in the chat box from where you're joining along with your LinkedIn ID so that we have people can network with you. So we have people, welcome Atif, welcome Rishikesh, welcome Harish, welcome Azam, welcome Sayed, welcome Imad, welcome Shobhi, welcome Harish Chandra, Mohammed Shahzad. We have people from Dubai. We have people mostly from Dubai, UAE. Welcome Faizan. Welcome Mati Raja. Welcome Mazen. Welcome Fatima. Welcome Faizan. Please share your LinkedIn ID so that people get time to network. Yeah. Welcome Sharon. Welcome Abdul. Welcome Dinesh. I can see mostly people are joining from Hyderabad. Welcome Faizan. Welcome Tahir. You can also join on our social media channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Welcome Ayman. Welcome Nisha. Welcome Heyman. So as we have people who have already joined our previous webinars, so this webinar will be for 1 hour, and which will have the presentation of our PMI chapter. Our distinguished speaker will take you through her presentation as well as question and answers. So please post the question and answers in the question and answers box, not in the chat box, so that we can identify all the questions. Welcome Allah, welcome Mazen. So till now we have 56 participants. Hope to get more by 7 or 5 p.m. We'll start the webinar in next 2 minutes. We have people joining from Abu Dhabi. We have people joining from Dubai, Alain, Hyderabad. So mostly from UAE. Welcome Fahid. Welcome Sri Kumar. Welcome Dinesh. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, because we have people joining from different time zones. We, PMI Chapter UAE, welcome everyone for joining us for another PMI UAE Chapter webinar. Before we get started, I would like to remind you, as we already said, please put your suggestions, comments in the chat box, and which will help us to identify what you're looking for from the webinar. And we are thrilled to welcome you all for PMI Chapter webinar. We will be diving into the topic Emotional Firewall, the missing layer in cybersecure project management. My name is Ankur, and I'm the host for today for the session, along with my colleague Reena and Amir. Before we begin, I would like to thank to our distinguished speaker and each one of you for joining us today. We encourage you for actively engaged throughout the sessions, whether it's asking questions, sharing your thoughts, suggestions, and please keep posting in the chat box, and your input are highly valuable for us. Let us take you to the PMI chapter presentation. PMI chapter is UAE chapter. PMI was founded in 1969 by a group of working project managers, and after 50 years later, PMI is now the source and resource for all things project management. PMI is one of the largest professional associations in the world and offer training, accreditation, and communities. It issues a globally recognized standard and credentials, and also sponsors and publishes research thoughts, leadership, and knowledge content. Our chapter vision: empower and influence individual with innovative project economy principle to turn ideas into a reality. Our chapter mission: to disrupt and create value-driven opportunities to our chapter members and partners to be agile, innovative, productive in the platform for the growth of project economy. A few more points about chapter. We are totally 100% run by our volunteers. We have more than 4,000 plus active chapter members, and we are the fifth chapter in PMI EMEA region. We focus on top leading industry and trends. We are serving the UAE aspiring community of project managers, PMI certified holders, and project and program professionals that are seeking the project management capabilities and offering the believing in the importance of our profession. And most important is we are totally dependent on you to make this chapter activities as interactive and as evaluating as possible. Our chapter president, Mr. Adil Sultan, and which is being led by Mr. Adil Sultan and supported by other directors. Our PMI membership benefits: you get an access to PMI library PIMBOK guide. You get a certification discount up to 30%. You get PMI standard, PMI access to PMI standards, PMI pick and career navigators. You get an access to community projectmanagement.com. You get a exclusive member only for events we have, so you get a benefit of that. Plus, you get tools and templates, publication reports, etc. The chapter member benefits, we have four pillars: networking, learning and knowledge sharing, career growth, and events. And events is a part, this webinar is a part of events. So you get all the benefits. Our new initiatives, introducing member corner and introducing member spotlight. You can also follow us on our social media platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and WhatsApp community. Now, introducing to our speaker, we welcome Nadja Al Fertasi, who has given like 2 decades for NATO, and we can say from NATO expertise to emotional intelligence coach, she has given her career. She is a leader in the field of emotional intelligence, which is EQ. She leverages her impressive background to help individuals and organizations thrive in today's complex world. Nadia has given, like I said, 2 decades at NATO, the world largest crisis management organization, and she has a privilege to work with people from over 40 countries at all levels, and which has helped her to master the art of stakeholders engagement and EQ. She is a founder of Thrive with EQ, an organization dedicated to empowering individuals and organizations through the emotional intelligence. She combined her expertise in EQ with the crisis management background to create a unique approach to human potential in a digital age. She has also be a part of a book which is Hacking Gender Barriers, Europe Top Cyber Women, featuring 100 plus influential women in cybersecurity across Europe by Women for Cyber Foundation. Without taking much of time, we'll pass on the stage to mic to Nadia to take it further. Nadia, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Uncle. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Hello, everyone. For those who celebrated Mabrok al-Eid, I hope you enjoyed the celebration. And it is an honor to be here today with you from Brussels, which I call the New York of Belgium. And I look forward, hopefully, inspiring you tonight. So let me share my screen. Here we go. Can everyone see my presentation correctly? I think yes.
Yes.
So I usually get a very skeptical welcome or opening when I talk about emotional firewalls. People say, Nadia, what does emotional intelligence have to do with information security management or cybersecurity? Is emotional firewalls another buzzword? And I don't see the link within this discipline. So this is what my mission is. My mission is to help business leaders and individuals build emotional firewalls in a digital age. And throughout the presentation, I will showcase and give examples of why emotional firewalls is not a buzzword. It's actually a theoretical methodology based on practical experience and implementation. And especially in the context of project management and program management. Now, before we dive into the presentation, a little bit of my own background. I've worked almost 2 decades at NATO, the world's largest security and crisis management organization. But I worked in the Information and Security Agency, which was always modeled as an enterprise. So I've worked for nearly 2 decades with program and project managers and all the large IT transformation programs, all the digital transformation programs. We were always part of integrated project management and program management. I also did some training and licensing in that area from my time at NATO. So I understand the context and the environment when it comes to project management on our digitization journey. My main role throughout my career, but especially in the last 5 to 8 years, was to translate the digital impact, the challenges of cyber into different maps of the world, into the map of the world of the North Atlantic Council, who is in charge of political decision making, military committees, industry, resources, budget. These have all different maps of the world. And when it comes to cyber, already at NATO in that time, we understood it was not an ad hoc work stream. It had to be integrated as NATO's nervous system because everything that NATO did was hinged on a technological foundation. And that technological foundation needed to be as secure as possible in order not to have any loopholes that would then lead to data breaches, commercial espionage, and even impact soldiers and civilians' lives when they were on mission. In 2019, I was recovering from a burnout. And during my burnout, I said, this is the time to do something else. I started looking for my soul. I haven't found my soul yet, but I have found my passion and purpose, which I founded Thrive with EQ, emotional intelligence. On how can we use emotional intelligence and resilience based on my practical experience and help people be more prepared. Then the pandemic happened. So then I focused mainly on cyber challenges because now we had a huge human surface attack where data was being breached by the social engineering attack went up 600% after the pandemic. So there was a huge need in helping people with practical strategies in managing the human element, the human cultural transition when it comes on our digitization journey. I was also interviewed for Belgium TV for my mission on emotional firewalls. I am passionate about helping individuals protect themselves against scams, especially younger. I'm a mother myself. Teenagers, they lack emotional resilience, but yet Gen Z and digital natives are 65% of global youth is using social media, and scammers and criminals understand that there is a huge opportunity for them to blackmail them for money or for compromising pictures or to hack their accounts because they are so addicted to social media and with all kinds of disastrous consequences. So I also have a vision on building an emotional firewalls academy to help people. My passion is training and coaching in especially in technical environment or business environment to bring people together. So imagine your IQ, your cognitive intelligence is your elevator in life. Your EQ, your emotional intelligence, is your trajectory upwards or downwards. We need our IQ to strategize, to analyze, to, to think ahead, but we need our emotional intelligence to manage the immediate challenges, to make sound decisions under pressure, to navigate the fast-paced change and uncertainty and the risk that cyber represents in every area of the business. And this can feel daunting. This can feel quite emotional when we deal with it. And if you don't have the vocabulary or the tools to manage it, then life at work and the business risk for data breaches is just going to increase and increase. So this is a little bit about me in visual. If I'm not working or writing as well, I love writing, and I also have a mental health newsletter. I'm taking care of my boy and my animal boy as well, which are my passion. So when we look at the cyber threats landscape, and I got this from the Cybersecurity Council of the United Arab Emirates, there are several cyber challenges, mainly ransomware attacks, data breaches, and distributed denial of services. I'm going to give some example of what those mean, but already earlier this year, the Cybersecurity Council of the United Arab Emirates has issued warning against public to raise awareness on how to be careful about the social engineering, because social engineering, they use the path of least resistance, which are employees, which are people. And I don't necessarily like the world, I like the world, but I mean the word, the sentence, human are the weakest links. I think it is too easy to say that. It is how, if you put yourself in a criminal mindset or a scammer's mindset, what is the path of least resistance in the digital age? It's not blockchain, it's not shiny technology, it's not the latest technology. These are all necessary to reduce the risk, but the path of least resistance are emotions, right? Are the emotions that when we feel stress, when we feel distracted, when we feel helpful, the internet in itself is designed based on trust, right? When we want to be kind and help. So, or when we have so much on our plates, it's easier to make mistakes. So understanding this will not eradicate social engineering. I don't believe it is going to be gone. It's just going to get worse. But you can equip people to achieve a level of residual risk, right? When we look at ransomware attack, when we look at the Colonial Pipeline attack in the US a few years ago, which caused them to shut down the supply chain of the East Coast in matters, decision was taken in matters of hours. Now, how did it start? It started with a compromised password from an employee. They got access to a password, and that's how they got in the system. When we look at large data breaches, when we look at the 2016 data breach of Uber, where over 50 million customer data was leaked. And this was also the first case where a chief information security officer was held criminally liable. And this was someone who was a former prosecutor himself. So he was quite well-versed in this landscape. When we look at the report that Oxford University and Ishtar, who focuses on cyber resilience, issued, they surveyed 37 CEOs of billion-dollar companies. They said it's no longer a cyber crisis, it becomes an emotional crisis. When we look at the regulatory landscape, right, already US and also now here in Europe with DORA, with Cyber Resiliency Act, with NS2, the liability scope is increasing. It's no longer an IT responsibility. C-suite and board of directors are also being held responsible. So the regulation is going up with carrot and stick, and businesses are, struggling as well to keep pace with this. One of the challenges I think you as project managers face is how do I translate this in terms of project management, right? How is this technical or the cybersecurity, how is it relevant for me and what is the impact on my project? So here I'm just going to give you a scope or a sense of the scene in the United Arab Emirates based on the report that you can check. So the landscape is already vulnerable when we look at the legacy systems that are still in place, when we look at vulnerable assets that provide an opening for cyber and data breaches. When we look at some of the groups that are known to operate in the region, so when I did my webinar for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it was very clear that main and for the region as a whole, the Middle East region, they faced 69% increase in social engineering attack because of the thriving innovative hub, because of the digitization journey, because of 2030 vision as well. And it was mainly commercial espionage or financially motivated as well. You also have hacktivist and geopolitically motivated attacks. And here as well, so the Cybersecurity Council, obviously, or in United Arab Emirates, is doing a lot of steps, and especially when it comes to cybersecurity awareness and integrating a holistic approach. Right, a lot of parts in the world are now really stepping up to not only see cybersecurity as an IT, a one-man show, or a technical issue, but a cultural issue as well. Now, when we look at it from a project management lens, this can feel overwhelming, right? You are focusing on managing your project, delivering project deliverables within cost, scope, and time. And now you also have to think about cyber risk, or if your team, the cybersecurity teams, comes with all these risks, what does it mean to you? Sometimes it doesn't affect you or your project. Other times it does. But what you like to think of is instead of feeling fear or trying to turn away because it feels what we don't understand, we don't want to look at because we have so many other things on our plate, to think of it when you write your feasibility study or when you set up your project, to also understand the terminology or to have different lenses and understanding cyber risk across your project. So in terms, so this is good to always be prepared and have simulated scenarios. If your project would face a data breach, what would be the consequences? What is the terms in terms of project delays? How will it delay the project, and what impact will it have on the outcomes and on the stakeholders? How do you manage stakeholders' expectations and communicate this? What are the financial risks, right? How are you going to reallocate resources in order to manage the financial risk? What is the risk in terms of reputation? We now live and work in a digital age where the question is no longer if I will be breached, or but when. And you want to have confidence and trust from your stakeholders and customers, not to avoid being breached, but to know that you have it covered towards the residual minimal risk, so that business continuity and business operations is minimally disrupted. What about compliance and legal risk? A lot of times when these breaches happen, then there is audits, then there is investigations and due diligence, right? There are a lot of factors that come into play. So working closely, not only with security team, but also with the legal teams is really important to understand the impact and consequences and increase your preparedness levels. So all these things, you can look at it with a PM hat, from a project management perspective, in order to reduce the risk and ensure a higher percentage of successful project delivery. So I prepared 2 questions, and I'm going to give you each a minute for each question. When you go on the Mentimeter, or when you scan this code, it will say presentation no longer available. It is available. You just need to enter the code that you see here, and you will be prompted or redirected to a question. And at the end of the webinar, or as a follow-up, I will share the results with the correct answer and explain why. So I'll give you a few seconds, 30 seconds for going here. This is the first question. What, from your own experience, what is the first step you would take if your project faced a data breach or a cybersecurity incident? And there's multiple choice questions, multiple answers. So, excuse me. If you can't access the Mentimeter for any reason, feel free to share your thoughts in the chat as well. And then the second is from an emotional intelligence perspective. What would you do to enhance communication during an actual cyber crisis to manage the impact on your project? So you don't necessarily have, so I have the multiple choices there, which you can choose from. And just choose the one that comes first to mind. So it's an anonymous survey. We won't have any names of who said what, but I will share the results at the end or in the handouts. So let's continue the presentation. When we look at what are the top 3 challenges for project managers when it comes to cyber, is how do you integrate cybersecurity into your project planning, right? If you are a project manager with an IT background or with a security background or with specifically even cybersecurity background, it may be easier for you because you are aware of the full scope when it comes to cybersecurity. If you don't have any knowledge when it comes to technical knowledge or security knowledge, it may feel more challenging. Now, one of the ways that I shared to navigate that is not to feel overwhelmed by what you don't know, but to have certain KPIs or measurements that are project management principle related, and then check, okay, if you don't necessarily need to know all the technical details of cybersecurity, right? It's more from a governance perspective. What is the impact if my project would face a data breach? Impact of resource allocation, reputational management, stakeholders, delays, etc., etc. So when you define those ahead of time, then it becomes easier because then you integrate cyber as a risk in your project management deliverables, right? It is a risk, and if data, our information will be leaked, or if this happens, you have a better understanding on the consequences, and then you can do what is in your locus of control to reduce that risk. The second one is managing stakeholder expectations. When we look at building trust and confidence within your organization, within teams, with employees, internal stakeholders, your external stakeholders, regulators, government agencies, board members, shareholders, customers, how do you maintain trust and confidence in the digital decade, right? That is a human element. We can talk to our mind, but when our data is breached or when we read the news on a daily basis that someone has been breached or hacked or scammed, it becomes an emotional issue. So managing, people relationships, that requires emotional intelligence on top of cognitive intelligence. And how do you keep up with all the evolving cyber threats? There was now one of the evolving cyber threats is there was a bank in Hong Kong a few months ago where a bank employee, and the bank's headquarters is based in London, wired 25 million pounds or dollars, I believe, to various accounts. And even though they were suspicious, they hopped on a video call with the chief financial officer and with other colleagues to reduce reasonable doubt. So it was confirmed that it was their colleagues. And in the end, the criminals use deep fake technology. So, and it's very difficult to recognize what is real and what is fake. So understanding, how do you as project management or as a culture within your company manage human multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is an extra layer to get into a system in order to secure it. But now you need to know people. You need to have checks in place that even if someone in hierarchy says yes, how do you challenge? Not everyone feels comfortable challenging leadership, which is another risk when we talk about CEO fraud or impersonation, right? They use this emotional, like when there's a high level of power distance, in order not to challenge your hierarchy. And then people wire money or give away their password or information or any details that then get them hacked. So these are uncomfortable topics perhaps to talk about, but it's really important to build a healthy, strong security culture. Because now we are in an age already, we're not moving, where emotions are being used as a weapon. So how can we equip people to shield, to use emotions as a shield against the criminals' weaponization? How does this fit, in PMI's power skills? So last year I was invited to deliver a keynote and to conduct a tabletop exercise with Ireland's PMI chapter, focusing on emotional firewalls and using emotional intelligence, helping the participants understand, well, how do you implement, right, resiliency against these cyber challenges? Uh, I went in the wrong direction. Yeah. So when we look at I had a little scare that I missed half of my slides, but I'm glad that that's not the case. So it's just the wrong error. So when we look at the PMI talent triangle, right? Leadership, strategic business management, technical project management. How can you use emotional intelligence within these elements? So leadership is all about how do you inspire, and I will explain what the correlation is with cyber security, cyber resilience, and data security in a moment. But when we talk about leadership, it's about mindset, behaviors, and habits, right? How do you get people along? And it's not necessarily only within your team, but also with your stakeholders. As project managers, one of the most difficult challenges is to get buy-in, is to get the resources you need, but also buy-in in your project and your project outcome, to have people believe and see and understand the vision before even it becomes a reality. And that takes leadership. When we talk about managing people, people are not processes or technology to be managed. They need to be inspired. They need to be guided. They need to be led, right, and empowered. And that takes leadership. So in this context, for me, I use it not as a title but more as a skill, right? And how can you use leadership in a digital age to create that confidence and reassurance, both in your internal and external stakeholders when it comes to your project? When we come at strategic business management, right? Especially when the stakes are high. How can you use EQ to actually integrate the cyber risk as a business risk? Because your necessarily point of view or interest is not to start explaining why it is a cyber risk. It's a security responsibility. But part of the project management is, how does this advance the business? How does this enhance the business continuity, right? And how do you create that level of confidence in the digital age that your project is managed safely and securely from also a business perspective? And then the technical is often when, so these three goes in tandem, of course, because it's when we focus on the technical project management skills, this also requires emotional self-awareness. If you're very comfortable, for example, using certain terminology, and then you are now faced with different technical terminology, or you have to explain your project in adding that security layer, this can cause emotional discomfort, which is normal when you adopt a growth mindset. When we talk about upskilling and reskilling, this comes with a growth mindset, and everything that is unfamiliar to our mind and brain comes with emotional discomfort, right? It's a very natural human thing, because there's no mental model, there's no image of what is familiar, because it's new. And when we talk about change happens to us, disruption happens within people. So understanding that when you feel discomfort, when you have to, for example, explain new concepts or integrate new concepts, it is only normal. And what you tell yourself in order to reduce that discomfort is really important to upskill in a faster, more efficient and effective way. I'm just going to pause here to see if there are any burning questions, or if you would like me to continue.
We got 3 questions, so we'll do it at the end of the session. You want to take it now?
Okay, thank you. I
Okay.
remember now. Apologies.
Yeah.
I had a little reset. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, some of you probably already know what it is. There are different schools of thought. There is the one from Peter Salovey from the Yale University, who has set up the Emotional Intelligence Center in Yale. And many people know Daniel Goleman from 6 Seconds, who also have these 4 skills of emotional intelligence. And this one was designed by psychologist Bar Raven On and issued by the Multi-Health Assessment Center in Canada, which was specifically designed for the workplace and related to professional performance in the workplace and leadership to manage, the challenges in the workplace. And the reason why it's very fit for the workplace, because it has a comprehensive set of scientifically validated skills on how we perceive ourselves, how we express ourselves, how we develop relationships, which is key for trust, how we make decisions, and how we manage stress, because emotions all play a role. And when we use a comprehensive toolkit, you give words to emotions and you give a framework to people, especially in highly technical or business environments, in order to improve performance. Now, I'm licensed to deliver this. And what I did is I took this discipline. I looked at the cyber security challenges that leadership faces, and I combined the two, right? I combined the two is that this toolkit you can use to equip people, to not have them as the weakest link, but to have them to use a shield. And a lot of times the challenges that business leaders face, they say people don't care about cybersecurity because they care about other things that's more important. So compliance rates are low, or cybersecurity is not necessarily taking into everyday tasks. And here's where I use a very different angle of emotional intelligence. People may care less about being a cause or part of data breach, but they care about leadership, developing these skills. They care about well-being. They care about less stress. They care about communication skills. They care about networking, influencing. So I use these angles to what people care about in cyber resilience or security scenarios, because cybersecurity is not ad hoc. It is how we live and work in the digital age. And that's how you get people on board, and that's how you get people to understand how can they do their part in reducing the risk beyond the technical part. Now, why is emotional firewalls, emotional intelligence important when it comes to business as a whole, but especially project management? Is data security in today's age is probably the #1 challenge in order to maintain trust and confidence from stakeholders, both internal and external, right? There's so much data out there, and everything now, especially if you work on cloud or if you are on your digitization journey, it's very difficult to guarantee 0% data breach risk, right? So, and when we focus only on the technical journey, where we have all these vendors selling their solutions, The problem is, at the end of the day, you can have an alarm system, you can have all the locks on your door, but it's a human who will turn off the alarm system and open the lock, so they get in the door, and then they can open the other doors that maybe have reduced locks. So it's understanding human behavior and human emotions as a risk, in this case, across your life cycle. So when we look at, for example, these are just examples, right? And you can think of other ones in your project management work. But when we look at the initiation with an EQ focus, so when you define scope and stakeholders, for examples, stakeholder management is part of project management, but also understanding the personalities, right? On you may have stakeholders who have high influence in your project, but low interest, but they are big on data security. And you need to understand this and build relationship with them in advance in order to have them as allies throughout your project execution strategy, for example. Or often what is missed or maybe not thought of, at least from my experience in NATO, is having, relationships internally with the legal department. This is key because they are your gateway to having, clean audits, your gateway to regulators and the government as well. So understanding, right, you now need to kind of expand on where do you build relationships, not until something happens, but you have these relationships so they can help make your project a success. Also, when you come now for seeking funding or approval, a lot of times they want to know what is the guarantee for data security. Now here you need the security team to give you this input, but as a project management manager at the end, you'll probably are held responsible or even accountable for a secure outcome. So these things require not only action from an intellectual perspective, but also relationships, right? And human beings, often we make this, especially when we feel stressed, we make decisions based on emotion, not necessarily using only our IQ. It's always a combination and depends on our mood, depends on personalities, etc. So relationship building in digital age is critical. When we look at, for example, if you manage a project in the energy sector, right? Who are your stakeholders? Maybe you now need to broaden it up, especially in the UAE. One of the most targeted sector is government, but also energy sector, financial institutions, right? So how do you have these initial meetings with security teams, with internal stakeholders, with external stakeholders? So it requires, from an internal perspective, it may come with increased emotional discomfort because it's more work, it's maybe more stress. You already have a lot on your plate. I know what it is. I've worked with many project managers and they often have to be everything to everyone as well. So it's not easy, but the more you understand this in your initiation phase and use emotional intelligence to reduce the risk of having challenges during the execution and implementation phase, the better. When I will share the handouts, I didn't want to use a lot of text. I have more text to put this all in context so you can read at your ease and understand exactly as key takeaways on how to apply the emotional intelligence. Here, when you, for example, use planning with an EQ focus, is how do you develop a holistic strategy that includes several core functions or requires cross collaboration across your organization and even external. How is this changing your KPIs, right? Your performance matrix as well. Are you now also including cyber KPIs in it, or are you outsourcing that only to the security teams? And how confident are you in that they can handle it or that they can reduce the risk? How closely are you working with the risk management officer if you have one in the company? Same thing with planning is when here the risk management is really important, is to not see risk management as something negative, but see it as an opportunity to understand and to brainstorm with very different stakeholders to understand the wider scope of potential risks in the on your digitization journey within your specific project and within your specific industry as well. Understand timeline and budgeting to also budget and get a buy-in to a plan for redirection of resources in case of data breach, and how you communicate this in a way that doesn't instill fear but instills confidence, because then your stakeholders will know that you are being quite realistic and planning ahead in order not to be behind the curve in the digital age, or on your digitization journey, to be more specific. Again, execution, here again, agility, change happens to us, disruption happens within us. How do you create agility within people? You probably need to be very flexible. Flexibility in emotional intelligence means how rigid someone's mindset or behavior and habits are in face of change. So when someone has low levels of flexibility, they maybe feel more confident, they have more resistance to change. We see this in adopting new technology or doing things differently. When someone has higher levels of flexibility, then they are more open to see change as an opportunity, and they can be one of your biggest change champions as well. Decision making, often, we need to make decision under pressure, very quick, and accept the consequences. And this requires also emotional awareness, impulse control, reality testing. Reality testing is, especially when we feel stressed, we may exaggerate or underestimate as well the challenges that are going on because of how emotions influence our ability to make decisions in that moment. And again, in order to keep our energy levels high, it's important to celebrate and to understand, right, the human effort that goes into this project and the relationships you've built with the security teams, with the legal, with your stakeholders, with the regulators even. Often when we work in silos, we think, it's like they are against us, but it's all about using emotional intelligence to build your bridges. Because it's an issue for all, right? For the entire business. I developed a few scenarios. So what I'm going to do, and you feel free to use the chat, and I'm going to maybe ask also the panelists who are here to give their point of view while everyone also uses the chat. I created two scenarios of potential scenarios that you can use, that may happen to you or have happened to you, where then the challenge comes of how do you use your IQ and how do you use your EQ. So here, for example, when we look at Jade, where she discovers a potential data breach just before her project's final review. So talk about Murphy's Law. And the breach involves sensitive client information, and the deadline is imminent. Now, here you're dealing with uncertainty because it's not confirmed whether there's a data breach, but already the thought of having a data breach invokes emotions of stress. Second, you have sensitive client information. So this has disastrous consequences on client relationship. I had one client where they faced a data breach, and one of the account managers, with all the good intention, they had a good relationship with the client. They informed the client of the data breach, and then the client took their business elsewhere, right? So there was a lack of communication protocol as well. And it was all with positive intention. And then you also have the pressure of delivering, right? So from an IQ perspective, from your cognitive intelligence, what Jade here is advised to do, and this is what I love to hear in the chat, how would you handle this, right? What is the first thing you would do when you are faced with this scenario? She decides to quickly assess the scope. Here she can use reality testing. What am I hearing, right? What am I seeing? And what is actually going on? Because sometimes when people feel stressed, or for the security, data breach is huge, but maybe the scope is not as big as or not affecting your project. So reality testing is really important here. And then impulse control and emotional awareness, stress tolerance for quick decisions making. What's the first right step? What's the next right step? What are the communication protocols? Who do I inform, right? Who needs to, one of the challenges we faced in NATO and businesses, that alarm is only rang too late. And then the leadership is only involved too late. And then they are upset because they didn't know in advance and they could have helped reduce the impact. So these are all the things you can prepare and train for. Here I used emotional self-awareness and empathy also to understand that not everyone will experience the data breach the same way, and understanding that, right? Not everyone sees the world as it is. We see the world as we are, depending on our mood, depending on our mental models, etc. So empathy is really understanding that, okay, being understanding of everyone, but also understanding how do I bring the team together and focus on the next right step. So this is one scenario that you may face, or may you already have faced, I don't know, where you can use both elements together. And then when we look at Faisal, so a key vendor has been compromised. When we look at supply chain risk, this is a huge one because often businesses also outsource their security for a part, but also they don't have a good overview, a grip on the supply chain ecosystem, right? So if there is a gap or there are vulnerability within their third party contractors, for example, at the end, who is accountable, who's responsible? At the end, people will come to you as a project manager, even if it has nothing to do, it's not your fault. So here, how will you manage in this case? So in this case, he will develop and execute a contingency plan to secure project data. So in his map of the world, the first thing he will take is minimize the impact on the customer data, because the consequences of customer data being breached has bigger impact than something else within the project, right? This is how he could have assessed it. And when we look again from an EQ perspective, is really understanding stakeholder relationships, and also how do you deal with the third party, the contractor. If you use low levels of emotional intelligence, you may try the blame and shame approach, or say, well, you're responsible, you need to fix this, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee a conducive outcome, right? How can you use then emotional intelligence? Say, okay, we have this problem now, we need to fix it as soon as possible, and later on we can look at what went wrong and learn from it. So understanding how those relationships are is really important. So please feel free in the chat to share. If anyone wants to share as well, or at the end, what they think from the panelists, please feel free. And again, when I will share the handouts, I will add some of the definitions of these EQ markers, so you can reflect within your own team, within your own company, on how would I actually, if I haven't, I hope you haven't experienced this, but if you would, how would you approach this, both from an IQ and EQ perspective? Now I am ready for a sip of water and your questions. I can't hear anyone yet.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Nadja. Thank you for giving a very wonderful presentation on the topic emotional firewall, the missing layer in cybersecurity project management. Because basically we have two things: we have EQ and we have cybersecurity. So we will try to use it as a shield, as you said in your presentation, and we're just waiting for the people to type in for, as you have mentioned, as uh, I mean, you said as Faisal or the other one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are just waiting if anybody wants to type what they wanted to. They'll focus on IQ focus or EQ focus. So is there anyone who are typing so that we can get the people views on the personas like Jade or Faisal?
Yeah. And again, what I will do in the handouts, I will share with the PMI chapter I will insert the definitions of all the EQ markers, so you can also revisit and say, okay, this is what self-regard means and how I can use it. This is what impulse control, reality testing, and then you can even discuss and brainstorm in your own teams different scenarios that may happen. Just a general question: if we had a data breach in our project, what are the consequences and how are we managing the impact?
Okay, nice. So we'll take our first question. This is from one of our attendee, Benel. As a cybersecurity expert, which comes priority prevention or detection?
Well, thank you very much for that question, because that question is double-edged sword. So in theory, and what my mission and mantra is for the businesses I work with, it's prevention. Because when you put in place protocols, especially in the preparedness phase, then you reduce the risk to the residual risk. So you have less risk of actually having a data breach. And when you do have a data breach, you're more equipped. And when we look, someone shared earlier some research statistics. They said that businesses who thrive in the digital age are the ones who have been hacked, because before there was no urgency to have prevention, and they have felt the pain of not having this prevention, and they are much better prepared now. The reality, however, because of lack of resources, lack of budget, because of so many different things, detection is more prioritized as what I have seen from my own work, right? So investment is okay. Who are the resources that we have? And they focus on detecting. But basically what you're doing is you're only looking at the Band-Aid, not at the wound itself, if I may use this analogy. If you want to really reduce the risk, we need to rip off the Band-Aid and understand what is causing the wound to bleed. But unfortunately, because of office culture, politics, resources, processes, people, detection is prioritized often, not always, over preparedness. But preparedness, like prevention, is as important, if not more important, than detection. Because the more you prevent, the less you will have to detect. Even though when it comes to detection, this is a huge mental burden on cybersecurity analysts, because you can, and this is why emotional intelligence is very important, because they are hours on the screen trying to find danger online. So you can only imagine what impact it has on their mental health and well-being and stress tolerance levels as well, which is why you see a rising trend when it comes to cybersecurity burnout. So as an additional note.
Thank you. So we'll take our next question. When you measure the cybersecurity landscape, how do you compare banking domain with healthcare domain? As both are key and vital, just the person would just want to understand too, how smooth is the rollout for security project in these domains?
So you mentioned healthcare domain and the other one?
Yeah, the healthcare domain and the banking domain.
Yeah. So I personally don't have, didn't do my research on the Middle East region, but I have worked with healthcare institutions in the US, and also with the financial institutions in Latin America, Asia, Europe, and Africa. So the financial institutions and healthcare are both equally important in terms they are highly targeted when it comes to social engineering, but they have a different structure when we look at it. So from a healthcare perspective, it is even more difficult to actually implement a cybersecurity holistic program, because they struggle with, it's often publicly funded, they struggle with resources. They are highly visible, but they don't have the means to necessarily implement cybersecurity. They work with legacy systems a lot. When I presented at Ireland last year, I took the case study of the HSE, Healthcare Executive System in Ireland, when they faced a data breach. So they entered the system months before they actually executed the ransomware. And then there was no coordination between the different healthcare agencies. And nurses and doctors found themselves with pen and paper at the end because they couldn't access the systems. So the healthcare, in terms from a technical infrastructure, but also a culture, still has a long way to go. And I cannot say the same for Middle East region because I don't have any insight, but I can only imagine that it's difficult to implement that. When it comes to the finance sector, the challenge there is usually they have quite a very solid technical infrastructure, high security protocols, but there they face the risks of insider threats, both intentionally and unintentionally. So here we look at phishing attacks, right? Falling for the email that gives them access to the data. Deep fake, as I mentioned in the bank as well. Culture, leadership, often it's a very rigid high structure. So they use a lot of CEO impersonation because speed is king. So scammers and criminals know this. They impersonate a CEO or an authority figure. And if there's a lot of fear or respect or wanting to prove themselves, they are more likely to act based on that emotion than to actually take a step back and challenge it. So they have higher levels of, on top of the healthcare, cultural challenges in protecting against cybersecurity challenges. I can't hear you. Sorry, I think it's mute. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. As per security point of DLP is mandatory for any organization?
Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Yeah. Salamat has asked, is as per security point of view, is DLP mandatory for any organization?
DLP?
Yeah.
What do you mean by DLP? That's an abbreviation.
Uh,
I forgot or I
Salamat,
don't know.
No, it's a data
Salamat, can
leakage
you?
prevention.
Sorry, data?
Data leakage prevention too.
Data leakage prevention. So can you repeat one more time the question?
Okay.
From a security point of view, is data
Yeah,
leakage
is
prevention?
data leakage prevention is mandatory for any organization?
Well, it depends. It should be. So this comes back to the first question of preparedness. When we look at companies who have solid processes, policies, and technical controls in place in order to reduce the risk of data breaches, are usually the organizations that already have been hacked because they have felt the pain of being hacked. But organizations who have not been hacked, they prioritize other elements within the business, often because either they don't understand cybersecurity enough, they don't have, the security team doesn't get the resources or budget they need, there are other issues going on, or it seems less urgent than other business outcomes. So in today's age, it really depends per organization, but data leakage prevention strategy should have a high priority because the more you have preparedness also from a culture and a leadership perspective, to educate every team leader and how to help build those emotional shields is important. Because again, with all the data out there, with people, just to give you an example, if you are working for a company that uses VPN, right, protected secure network, the manager needs to have a report by COB tomorrow. The VPN doesn't work, or you can't access the network. What do people do often? They use their Google Drive or they use their Gmail. So now they are using company data on personal cloud networks or devices. And there have been cases of social engineering attacks where they made up this Google Drive spoof or Google Drive social engineering to steal data. So when we explain, this is I'm also working with some security teams to translate security into stories so people understand it in their map of the world, then they understand the urgency and the importance from their perspective. But if we just tell them a DLP, for example, or like the data breach prevention, they know it's like, well, why should I care? It's not important to me. My job is to make sure I deliver by COB, so I get a good performance assessment from my manager, keep them happy, and that's it. But the risk of doing this on your personal device or personal email, instead of waiting until the VPN is up and running, is mismatched, you see, and that is a cultural, that is a people issue. It's a leadership issue. From my point of view, humble point of view, if I may say.
Okay, as the next question is from Mohammed. It is a very interesting question. How does cybersecurity affects our mental health? Is it
That's a big question, which has various answers to it. So first, I'll answer it from a cybersecurity perspective. So understanding cybersecurity teams. Often it affects their mental health greatly because they are often understaffed, under-resourced, and they are the first point of contact for when IT is disrupted. So this is one. When you have cybersecurity analysts or threat detections, they are constantly within a mindset of finding and looking for danger. As a human being, how are you separating this in your personal life, right? It's not like you can switch off, I'm no longer looking for danger, depending on how intense this is. Then often companies don't have cybersecurity, they just have an IT team. And often businesses even confuse information technologists with cybersecurity, have a very different purpose and training. Information technology is to help people use technology in an innovative way, which is risk tolerant, versus security is risk averse. Right? How do you help people use it in a secure way? So often this creates a clash, and it's always trying to, convince and upskill based, and they often also experience performance anxiety because it's a very different discipline. So from a cybersecurity perspective, you see high levels of burnout as well because not enough people, the threat landscape is enormous, lack of cyber hygiene, right? People are not necessarily compliant with cybersecurity awareness or cyber hygiene principles, and they are at the receiving end. This is one. The second one, mental health, is people who fall for scams, whether it's romance scams, whether we look at our children. This is what I mentioned in the beginning. I'm very passionate to help young kids, develop emotional resilience. Working parents are struggling with this. They have to work and they also have to raise our kids. And when we try to deflect, we give them social media or phone at a very initial age, but there's a lot of danger that comes with it. They're not equipped to deal with the emotional fallout of being kind of lured in through algorithms likes too. They want to be popular, peer pressure. Example, in the US, Pentagon a few years ago, this was a young officer, 21 years old, who leaked highly sensitive information on a Discord gaming channel. Why, we don't know. I don't know. I wasn't there, but probably it's peer pressure. It's lack of that emotional resilience. But from a cultural perspective as well, right? They may blame it. They blamed it on Jake Texera. But how do we give that much responsibility to someone who is facing already at that age a lot of emotional growth, for example, or lack of resisting their peers? So these are all maybe uncomfortable topics, but they affect people's health, especially scammers. We have what is now called pig. I'm also part of a volunteering group that is fighting pig butchering. Pig butchering, it's a very not a nice name, but basically it's a cryptocurrency investment scheme where people invest their crypto money. They see their investment going up. They can see proof. And then the scammers who use forced labor, so they traffic people, they put them in a compound in Asia, and then they tell them to scam people. They take the money and then go away. So people, they are lost their pensions, their life savings, and it's easy to say, well, I would never fall for that. But a lot of people face loneliness, they face pressure, etc. So the lines between personal and professional are more blurred. So the transition into the digital age is quite taxing on our mental health in several ways as well. We are more digitally connected, but less physically, less humanly connected. And understanding what does it mean to be human in the digital age, and how can we create safe and secure online societies, and also make it not only an individual responsibility, but also a corporate and a social responsibility. So thank you very much for that question.
Okay, thank you, Nadia, because we have short of time. So I'm so sorry, we have taken few of the questions and few of the questions will not be able to take it. But these questions are also very interesting about what they have asked for.
Please,
So
you can send them to me by email and I'm happy to answer them, and I will add them to the handout so we can have those questions answered as well.
we will surely do that. We'll surely try to do that and share all the questions with you so that you can add it to the handout.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very interesting session. What we have learned, we must be implementing EQ and cybersecurity as a shield. And you have thought about, because we have young kids, so we understood that the cybersecurity is more important because kids are not aware about the bad effects of that. So you have even talked about the data glitch in Google. We talked about cyber resilience. We talked about the threats, how the strategic cyber defense, and how do you communicate cyber risks through a PM perspective, what we have discussed. I think one question was there. I think this was this answer, what we have learned, like what kind of risk we can face, like project delays, financial risk, reputational risk, what you have taught. I think this was the answer for that question. Plus, we talk about the three challenges, what you have used. Okay. And I'm sure that it's a healthy security culture is always required for a management, a company. We discussed about the PMI talent triangle where you have used, I mean, the emotional fire. We talk about the emotional firewall toolkit. Plus, we discovered about the EQ, how we can use EQ in our PMI life cycle. It was very interesting. You have taught all the stages like initiation, planning, execution, and closure. We did how we can implement this to our PMI life cycle. It was, we appreciate for each knowledge you have shared with us and our attendees, plus how we can plan an EQ focus policies execution with an EQ focus closure. We appreciate each one of you for attending and making this webinar a success. Your engagement and questions were valuable for the discussions. I'm sorry we were not able to take all the questions because I was short of time, but we'll try to share with Nadja and she can share in her handouts. We wouldn't be here without the dedication of our team. Thanks to our marketing team for promotion of the webinars on our website and social media. Special thanks to our PMI chapter volunteer from membership, outreach, volunteering, finance team for their invaluable and support in making it even possible. Finally, a thanks to Amir, Achal, and Reena for their contribution behind the scenes. And Nadia, you just have to show that mentee result. Actually, you forgot to show the result.
Yes, well, it's because the time, but let me just check, see the results.
Yeah.
Here we go. So present. Let me share screen. So can everyone see it?
Oh, so identification, yeah.
Yeah, identification is correct, right?
Oh,
and then
so
yeah. This one was not filled in. So here, when we look at EQ competency that could enhance communication, what is really important to remember and to develop this also beforehand is empathy, right? Empathy for yourself, understanding that you are under a lot of pressure, but also empathy for others, that others will not necessarily act or speak in the way or do the same things in the way that you would expect. And how do you manage this? How do you use prevention? Is where you build relationships. Because, for example, when we trust each other, we will question each other much less so, right? So empathy is very important. The other one, which could be argued, obviously, self-regulation, because you will feel a lot of stress. The brain communicates with the body that you are in big danger. So it's important to reduce that stress, the false sense of stress, so you can go from the hippocampus to the prefrontal cortex, where we make decisions based on regions and say, okay, what's the next right step? What's the next right step? And the more you've done this through training and prevention, the better you're equipped in terms of readiness. Often people know what to do, but when it comes to the actual crisis, they are more driven by emotions than by knowing what to do.
Thank you.
I will hope this in the presentation as well. Sorry.
Thank you. So we hope this webinar would help us so that we can implement EQ plus cybersecurity in our own daily routine, in our own. In fact, it's not about the office. It's about not the projects actually. It's about our daily life also, because scam can be happen to anyone. Yeah. So we look forward for seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you. And thank you for the great summary of my presentation.
Thank you.
Good point, though.
Yeah. Thank you.
Assalama. Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.